A thick fog clung to the earth, wrapping the old St. Mary's Hospital in a suffocating embrace. The building stood on the outskirts of town, abandoned for decades. Its windows, like empty eye sockets, stared blankly into the night, revealing nothing but darkness within. It was said that St. Mary's had been shut down after a series of mysterious deaths, each more gruesome than the last. The locals whispered about the hospital's cursed past, warning each other to stay away. Yet curiosity often leads the brave and the foolish alike into places they shouldn't go. Jake, a thrill-seeker by nature, couldn't resist the allure of the hospital's dark history. On a cold October night, he and his friends, Sam and Emily, decided to explore the haunted halls of St. Mary's. Armed with flashlights and a video camera, they entered through a side door that had long since lost its lock. "This place gives me the creeps," Emily whispered, clutching Jake's arm. "That's the point," Jake grinned. "We're here to find ghosts, remember?" Sam, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "Ghosts don't exist. This is just an old, run-down building." The trio ventured deeper into the hospital. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of decay. Their footsteps echoed down the empty corridors, blending with the distant sound of dripping water. The walls were adorned with peeling paint and graffiti, remnants of past intruders. As they explored, they came across the old maternity ward. Rows of empty cribs lined the room, each one coated in a thick layer of dust. Emily shivered, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. "Let's keep moving," she urged. They moved towards the surgical wing. As they entered, the temperature dropped noticeably. The walls were covered in old medical charts and faded photographs of patients long forgotten. In the center of the room stood an operating table, its surface stained with something dark and ominous. "This is where the last patient died," Jake whispered, aiming his flashlight at the table. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as they fumbled to turn them back on. When the lights finally flickered back to life, they noticed something that hadn't been there before: a figure standing in the doorway. The figure was that of a nurse, her uniform tattered and stained with blood. Her eyes, hollow and lifeless, stared directly at them. She raised a hand pointing toward the operating table. "Leave this place," she whispered, her voice a chilling echo. Jake, frozen with fear, could barely move. Emily grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the door. Sam, however, stood his ground, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. "This isn't real," he muttered. "It's just our minds playing tricks on us." The nurse took a step forward, her expression twisting into one of anger. The room filled with a deafening scream, a sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. The walls shook and the lights flickered violently. "Run!" Emily screamed. They bolted from the room, sprinting down the hallways in a blind panic. The hospital seemed to come alive around them, doors slamming shut, shadows darting across their path. The once silent building now echoed with the sounds of footsteps and whispers. They reached the main lobby, the large double doors just ahead. Jake threw himself against the doors, pushing them open with all his might. The cold night air hit them as they stumbled outside, gasping for breath. "What the hell was that?" Sam panted, his face pale. "I don't know," Jake admitted, his hands trembling. "But it was real." Emily, tears streaming down her face, nodded in agreement. "We shouldn't have come here." The trio made their way back to town, the weight of their experience pressing heavily on them. They agreed never to speak of what happened that night, fearing ridicule and disbelief. But the events at St. Mary's left an indelible mark on each of them. Jake, once fearless and adventurous, became withdrawn and anxious. He would often wake in the middle of the night, haunted by nightmares of the nurse in the operating room. Sam, the skeptic, could no longer deny the existence of the supernatural. His encounter with the ghostly nurse shattered his perception of reality, leaving him questioning everything he once believed. Emily, deeply affected by the experience, dedicated herself to researching the history of St. Mary's. She discovered that the nurse they encountered was one of the last to work there, accused of performing unsanctioned experiments on patients. Her spirit was said to haunt the hospital, seeking revenge for the injustices she suffered. Years passed, but the memory of that night never faded. One day, Emily received a letter from an anonymous sender containing a photograph of the nurse. On the back of the photo were the words, "Help me." Unable to ignore the plea, Emily decided to return to St. Mary's. This time she went alone, determined to uncover the truth and put the nurse's spirit to rest. The hospital was just as she remembered, its eerie silence broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. She made her way to the surgical wing, where the encounter had taken place. The operating table still stood in the center of the room, a grim reminder of the past. As she stood there, the temperature dropped once more. The nurse appeared before her, just as she had years ago. But this time, her expression was one of sorrow, not anger. "What happened to you?" Emily asked softly. The nurse raised a hand, pointing towards a cabinet in the corner of the room. Emily opened it, revealing a hidden compartment containing a stack of old journals. She took one and began to read, uncovering the horrific truth about the experiments and the suffering endured by the patients. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she read. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The nurse nodded, her form beginning to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. With that, the spirit vanished, leaving Emily alone in the silent hospital. She gathered the journals and left, determined to share the truth and ensure that the horrors of St. Mary's would never be forgotten. Emily's discovery sparked a renewed interest in the history of St. Mary's Hospital. The journals were published, revealing the dark secrets hidden within its walls. The hospital was eventually demolished, making way for a memorial park dedicated to the victims. Though the building was gone, the memories of that fateful night remained with Jake, Sam, and Emily. They had faced the darkness and survived, forever changed by their encounter with the silent ward of St. Mary's.